Hey there, Cinemaster fans. Hope you're ready for some movie magic. Let's dive right in. We will talk today about Newtopia, which is, while serving his first year in the military, Sergeant Lee dreams of the day he'll receive his discharge so he can finally reunite with his girlfriend. But that day is taking longer to arrive than he would like. Every morning, after putting on his uniform, Lee and his comrades go out to stand guard and ensure the safety of the place. During his shift, the young man calls his girlfriend and finds out she got home late at night after drinking heavily. Furious, Lee starts arguing with Yuna on the phone and ends up getting caught in the act by his boss. Later, when she goes to work, Yuna receives an invitation from her boss to join him for dinner, but she turns it down because of her boyfriend. However, after thinking about the future of their relationship, the young woman decides to send a message to Lee and break up with him. A few days later, while crying as she watches an old video she recorded with her ex-boyfriend, Yuna receives a call from Jin and finds out he is parked in front of her building. Quickly, she gets ready to meet him, and her manager takes her to dinner at a beautiful restaurant in that neighborhood. During the meal, Yuna receives a call from Lee and decides to ignore it, but soon after realizes her ex-boyfriend left a message and goes to the bathroom to listen to it. Through the voicemail, Lee says that breaking up is the best decision they could make, since there are still 18 months left before he is discharged from the army, and it wouldn't be fair to ask Yuna to wait for him all that time. After listening to the recording, the young woman starts to cry and decides to take a taxi home as she isn't feeling well. However, noticing her distress, Jin decides to take her to the military base so she can have a chance to talk to Lee. But on the way, they get into an accident and a man is run over. When Yuna feels one of the victim's eyes on her neck, she screams in desperation, and at the same time, Lee and Siwon spot a plane flying toward the building where the military base is located. Terrified, the two men hug each other, but the aircraft changes course and crashes in the city center. After the crash, Yuna begins to cry and Jin grabs his phone to call his insurance company, while the young woman tries to help the victim. After witnessing the plane disaster, Lee and Siwon enter the elevator to reach the hotel rooftop, where the military base is. At that moment, Manager Park enters the elevator with them, as he is on his way to his office. However, when they stop on the 53rd floor, the trio is faced with a corridor full of bodies and people running desperately, as if fleeing from something. Immediately, Park presses a button to go to another floor, but the elevator door is blocked by a man begging for help. Suddenly, after asking for help, the man collapses lifeless on the floor. Then the manager uses his suit to cover the man's head and decides to go out to investigate what is happening. Upon doing so, Park and the sergeants come across countless bloodstains everywhere and guests jumping from the upper floors. While cautiously walking through the area, Siwon slips in a pool of blood and finds a man crawling on the floor, with only half his body. At that moment, Yuna is still at the accident site and gets help from Taewon-si to remove the victim's body from the windshield. When they lay the man on the ground, the young people notice he has a bite mark on his neck, and Taewon-si realizes he isn't breathing. So, while waiting for the ambulance, the young man decides to perform CPR to try to revive the victim, but ends up making things worse. Entering one of the hotel restaurants, Park is attacked by a waitress and asks the soldiers for help to get rid of her. After knocking her out with a blow to the head, the men trap the woman's body with a table and Lee runs to grab a bottle of alcohol. That way, his colleagues manage to set the creature on fire, and at that moment, a runaway truck heads toward Jim's vehicle, destroying every car in its path. Seeing the driver's head through the windshield, Yuna panics and hurries to help Jim out of the vehicle. Luckily, both manage to get out of the way of the truck in time, but some people end up injured before the vehicle crashes into a shop window. That afternoon, the government declares a national state of emergency, and the military are called into action immediately. When he learns from the head of security that the entire hotel is in chaos, Park decides to go to his office to wait for rescue and advises the sergeants to use the stairs to return to the unit. While Lee and Sihoon try to escape the zombies inside the hotel, Yuna and everyone who hasn't been infected must flee from the undead outside. On the way to the base, the sergeants find a hotel employee hiding in a storage room and manage to convince her to go to the rooftop with them. However, on the way, they are surprised by a zombie hiding under the counter, and Lee uses his lighter along with a cleaning product to set it on fire. Even so, even after its face is burned, the zombie keeps trying to attack him, but Sihoon steps in and strikes the creature directly in the head. At that moment, the trio hears some cries for help and runs to assist Chief Jung in holding back the undead, who are about to break through the glass door. To prevent his companions from being bitten, Lee sets a cleaning cart on fire and orders everyone to step back so he can attack the zombie. The problem is that the flames soon trigger the sprinkler system and the fire is quickly extinguished. Because of this, the group has to run up the ramp and hide in the emergency stairs. Minutes later, the survivors manage to reach the rooftop and are relieved to be safe at the military base. Soon after, they hear a loud noise and Si-hoon quickly realizes that the zombies have managed to open the door and are coming up the stairs. Soon, they will reach the rooftop, so the soldiers need to hurry to close the gate. Suddenly, Chief Jung faints and wakes up shortly after with a completely different demeanor. Seeing the cook acting this way, the survivors realize he was infected by a bite on his leg, and Si-shung almost becomes the next victim. After being struck, Jung goes on the attack and captures one of the soldiers. When they see their comrade in danger, the other soldiers join forces to defeat the enemy and Schumann manages to immobilize him. However, while grabbing the zombie by the neck, the soldier is bitten in the stomach and all his companions unite to help him. While Si-hoon knocks down Chief Jung, Lee and the others give first aid to their wounded comrade, but Schumann does not survive. After the incident, Commander Park decides to return all the soldiers' cell phones so they can alert their families about the threat the country is facing, and Lee finally manages to see Yuna's messages. At this moment he discovers that his ex-girlfriend was near the base when the attack started, and begins to cry because he is unable to contact her. Not knowing what to do, the young man sends some messages to let her know he is okay, and advises her to find a safe place to hide until things settle down. When she turns her phone back on, Yuna is relieved to see Lee's messages and tries to call him, but her phone carrier can't complete the call due to the high volume of calls. Determined to reunite with her ex-boyfriend, Yuna says goodbye to the guys who helped her find a hiding place and prepares to return to the hotel, but Taechi decides to accompany her and Jin follows them because he's afraid to be alone. In the middle of the night, the trio cautiously crosses the streets to avoid being seen by the zombies, who are spread throughout the city. Meanwhile, Lee and the other soldiers are having dinner in the cafeteria when they hear a noise coming from the infirmary, and soon realize that Schumann has turned into a zombie. Seeing his friend alive, Hyunbi is happy and runs to check if he is okay, but at that moment the soldier ends up being bitten and all his colleagues mobilize to help him escape the attack. While Soo-jung helps Bo revive the wounded man, the other soldiers band together to eliminate Schumann, and after covering him with a blanket, they finish him off with a shot. Suddenly, Hyunbi wakes up as a zombie and walks toward the soldier. Seeing his companions in danger, Si-hoon throws hot water in the zombie's face and then hits him with a pan. To prevent his friend from being bitten, Lee grabs a gun and prepares to shoot Hyunbi, but Soo-jung is quicker on the trigger. On the way to the base, Yuna and her friends find a young man who has been bitten and decide to take him to a safe place. Upon arriving at a restaurant, the trio ties up Sensu and begins to interrogate him to find out what happened. They then discover that he had already been drinking when he was attacked by the zombie. While Taeshi tries to convince Jin not to abandon Sensu, a zombie dressed as a traffic guard appears and runs toward Yuna. Luckily, the young woman manages to dodge the attack, and during an accident, the zombie's head is destroyed. At that moment, Taeshi takes the breathalyzer to measure the alcohol level in Sensu's body, and concludes that zombies do not attack people who have drunk too much. This theory arose when the boy saw Sensu being completely ignored by the zombie, who went directly toward Yuna. So, the trio decides to drink to ward off the zombies, even though they don't know if this theory is correct. At dawn, all 4 survivors are completely drunk and wander aimlessly, hoping not to be attacked. However, when he sees all those zombies around, Jin drags Yuna behind a vehicle. While they hide, Sensu uses a car horn to attract the creature's attention and clear a path for his new friends to pass through. That afternoon, Lee and his platoon spot a helicopter that was sent to deliver supplies and begin signaling to attract the pilot's attention. However, when the aircraft approaches the helipad, Si-hoon realizes that all the passengers have turned into zombies and the commander orders the soldiers to position themselves to bring down the helicopter. After firing several times at the tail of the aircraft, the soldiers manage to bring it down and are terrified, as it is the first time they have had to destroy a helicopter. Knowing that all the food and water in the barracks will soon run out, Commander Park decides to lead an operation to safely evacuate his men from the building before it's too late. Meanwhile, Yuna and her friends arrive at the building where Lee and the soldiers are, and find the place infested with the undead. Thus they decide to hide in the hotel garage, hoping that Lee will contact his girlfriend to arrange a meeting point. However, upon arriving there, Yuna and Jin end up being attacked and realize that the alcohol strategy didn't work for them. While their friends climb onto parked vehicles to try to escape the attack, Taeshi and Sensu throw improvised bombs at the zombies and help the pair to escape. However, during the escape, Taeshi ends up being captured, and all the zombies join together to devour him. At that moment, Yuna tries to go back to help the boy, but Jin drags her away because he knows there's no saving him. For some reason, Sensu, the human in the group who doesn't attract the zombies' attention, takes advantage of this to try to save his friend, but Taishi sacrifices himself to set all the undead attacking him on fire. Meanwhile, Lee and his platoon prepare to face the zombies they encounter along the way and eliminate them all to go down to the hotel's VIP lounge. At this point, they stop in the kitchen to get food and Lee takes the opportunity to use the bathroom. While he is inside, the young man notices that his phone signal is back and immediately calls Yuna. When he discovers that the woman he loves is alive, Lee breathes a sigh of relief and arranges a safe place to serve as a meeting point. At that moment, Yuna's battery dies and her phone turns on. In the kitchen, while gathering supplies, Su Jung and the soldiers find Paolo, and after checking that he wasn't bitten, they decide to take him with them. After stealing one of the cars from the parking lot, Sensu rescues his friends and the trio speed toward the train station, where a military base has been set up to shelter survivors. Before leaving, Paolo prepares a meal to feed the soldiers who rescued him, and Commander Park decides to go to the kitchen to get a soda. At that moment, he hears a noise coming from the ventilation ducts and ends up being attacked. Hearing their superior's screams, the soldiers grab their weapons to neutralize the threat and are surprised by a legless zombie crawling toward them. Terrified, they start shooting and eliminate the creature, but they can't save the commander's life, who has just been turned into a zombie. On the way to the station, Sensu decides to get out of the car and says he's going home to see his family. However, the truth is that he realizes he's not well, as his transformation is almost complete. When his calf was bitten, Sensu was infected, and that's why the zombies stopped trying to attack him. The thing is, the farther from the brain the bite is, the longer it takes for the victim to transform, as the infection spreads slowly. While fighting the zombies to prevent them from reaching his friends, Sensu begins to suffer side effects and his transformation is completed. After being bitten by a zombie, Park decided to lock himself in his office, but when he realizes there's no rescue coming, the manager decides to leave and creates an improvised suit to protect himself. As he walks through the corridors, he notices that the zombies are not trying to devour him and feels relieved. Now that the commander is gone, Kim needs to take command of his platoon, as he is second in command. Noticing that it won't be possible to reach the ground floor via the stairs, the team decides to go down by elevator, and during the descent, they end up meeting Park. However, upon seeing the soldiers inside the elevator, the manager advises them to go down first and reveals that he has been bitten. At that moment, some zombies fall on top of the elevator, and the soldiers are forced to get out, as the glass ceiling is about to break. When they reach a certain point on the road, Jin and Yuna get stuck in a traffic jam, as all the survivors from Seoul are heading to the train station. At that moment, they are attacked by a group of men who break the window and steal the vehicle. Luckily, the pair are near the bus terminal, where emergency trains are being made available to take survivors to the shelter. Seeing the train approaching, the passengers start pushing each other to guarantee their entrance and end up destroying the glass barrier that prevents them from falling onto the tracks. When the wall is knocked down, dozens of people fall onto the train tracks and are struck. During the confusion, Yuna ends up separated from Jin, and when she finally manages to board the train, she decides to give her seat to a little boy. However, when the train leaves, the young woman sees dozens of zombies trapped in the back carriage and realizes that maybe those people won't make it alive to the station. Looking at the tracks, Yuna sees Jin's watch and realizes that her manager was one of the victims. At that moment, Rin's grandmother starts running along the tracks trying to reach the boy, and Yuna goes after her. Seeing another train approaching, she pulls the old woman to the side of the wall and realizes she has been bit. As the train passes through the tunnel, Yuna sees the lady transform and pushes her head against the train to defend herself. Now that she is alone, the young woman needs to find a charger to turn on her cell phone and contact her ex-boyfriend. After leaving the elevator, Lee and his companions face a horde of zombies and with Park's help, manage to hide in different rooms to avoid being infected. Since the hallways are infested, the manager advises the soldiers to go down through the ventilation ducts and enters first to mark the direction the survivors should follow. After stealing some security equipment from a store, Ayuna continues on her way, ready to eliminate any monster that comes near her with her chainsaw. While crawling through the tunnels, So-jung and Bo are chased by a group of undead and need to hurry so they don't end up being devoured. Luckily, the couple finds two other soldiers on the way and crouches down while they shoot at the zombies. However, Paolo was not so lucky, as the monster that attacked him is only eliminated after removing one of the cook's ears. Since the bite was very close to the brain, it doesn't take long for Paolo to transform, and Park makes the decision to push him into the elevator shaft. Next, the manager uses two communicators to make a loud enough noise to attract all the zombies hiding in the duct, and manages to lure them to the same hole where Paolo was thrown. After going down the emergency stairs, the team reaches the lower floor and splits up to look for the freight elevator that could take them to the basement. When cornered, Ayuna attacks the zombies with her chainsaw and forms a pile of bodies that helps her buy time to escape. As she walks through that dark place, the young woman hears music and follows the sound until she finds a group of survivors hiding in the subway lost and found room. After grabbing a scooter, Yuna continues her journey to find her ex-boyfriend. During the search for the freight elevator, Se-hyun spots a scaffolding on the side of the building, and Lee decides to go down to it using the cables to fetch it. After retrieving his friends, the young man presses the button to lower the scaffolding, but the structure stops working halfway down. Seeing a horde of zombies trying to break the glass to reach them, Lee hits the machine and manages to get it working again. The problem is that shortly after, the monsters manage to break the window and jump after them. During the fall, some manage to grab onto the scaffolding and try to bite the soldiers, but end up being eliminated. Amid the battle, while the survivors try to throw the zombies down, the cables holding the scaffolding start to snap, and once again, the soldiers have to get off on one of the building's floors. The last to descend is Sergeant Lee, who during the accident, is thrown to the third floor and ends up in a toy store. When he wakes up, the young man finds himself facing an infected person wearing a teddy bear costume, and decides to throw him down to see if the foam can protect him during the fall. Seeing the zombie walking normally after hitting the ground, Lee puts on a costume and jumps from the third floor to find Yuna. After surviving the fall, the young man grabs his weapon and contacts his colleagues who are on the fourth floor, trying to contain the dozens of undead who want to devour them. While throwing the zombies out of the building, Se-hyun sees his friend in the parking lot and is relieved to know he is alive. Through the communicator, Lee shares his idea with his team to help them reach the ground floor. The plan is to use the scaffolding cables as a zipline so the soldiers can use their vests to slide down. To cushion the fall, Lee places some mattresses in strategic positions and manages to prevent his friends from getting hurt during the impact. However, when it is Kim's turn to descend, the team discovers he has been bitten. To avoid the risk of infecting his colleagues, the sergeant decides to stay in the building and says goodbye to the team. Now the next step for Lee and his friends is to find the key to one of the vehicles in the parking lot to head to the station. However, instead of leaving with his companions, Young Chi decides to stay behind. Sometime later, Sergeant Kim ends up falling from the building, and upon seeing one of his best friends crawling as a zombie, Young Chi decides to shoot him to spare him from that suffering. On the way to the station, Lee notices that Manager Park is not well, and decides to stop at a restaurant to try to get him a drink, as alcohol slows the effect of the infection. At this moment, the soldiers take the opportunity to eat, knowing they have a long journey ahead. Upon seeing a landline phone next to the cashier, Lee decides to call his mother-in-law's house, and Mrs. Kang reveals that she has just received a call from Yuna. According to her, her daughter is hiding at the express bus terminal, and said she will only leave the next day. Worried about Yuna, Mrs. Kang asks her son-in-law to find her, and Lee says he will look for the young woman, but orders his mother-in-law not to leave the house. Later, when his companions return to the vehicle, Lee says goodbye, and reveals that he has one more mission to complete before going to the station. After stealing a motorcycle, Lee rides toward the bus terminal, and searches every corner for his beloved. As he crosses a corridor full of bodies, the soldier shouts his girlfriend's name, which makes him the target of the infected. Even knowing this, Lee ignores all the risks to find the young woman, and his voice reaches Yuna's ear. When she realizes her boyfriend is nearby, she shouts back and runs straight into his arms. Suddenly, the girl hears some gunshots, as Lee is being attacked, and needs to shoot the zombies running toward him. Even though she's terrified, Yuna keeps moving forward, and comes across a monster in her path. Just as she's about to be attacked, Lee appears and eliminates the creature with a precise shot. After being separated for several weeks, the couple is finally reunited, and has the chance to embrace, after everything that has happened. As the young people look for an exit, a new group of zombies appears, and Lee prepares to shoot, when he sees his friends coming through the door, and taking down each one of them. Instead of going to the station, the soldiers decided to help their companion rescue his girlfriend, and now everyone can head to the camp together. While driving, Bo turns on the radio, and hears a new announcement from the authorities, who are instructing survivors to head to the harbor instead of the station. At this moment, the team decides to get out of the vehicle to breathe some fresh air, and Lee promises Yuna that no matter what happens, he will never leave her. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification button so you never